Clips.
And remember, citizens, always subscribe. Hit the notification bell as well. And $19.95 plus shipping and handling will keep you out of hell. Alrighty, boob tubes, another one of Gabe's Clips. Subscribe. Yep, everything's working. So in the afternoon. So shout out to anybody that knows the mechanics of how you get picked as an MP to be asking your questions this week. I know last week was a kind of short PMQs because of the budget and whatnot. But what's the mechanism, the mechanics? Because surely the Prime Minister can't be expected to answer every question for every MP in the whole house, every PMQs. The fact that George Galloway's in there, and it's interesting to watch how, or if he's going to be ignored or moved to the side or whatnot, has made me want to find out, and I will at some point. But if anybody does know, please drop me a line. Now I'm going to go and make myself a wee cup of tea. What time's that? 58. A couple of minutes before the PMQs kicks off. Got my microphone switched on. Always a good thing.
As they already have.
Their audio's coming through, no problemo. Have a wee turn on
judgment, which is why, given the comments that were allegedly made, why did it take Downing Street almost 24 hours, maybe a bit more, to conclude that these comments were racist? So yes, the scene is set, I think, for a pretty bruising encounter.
As you mentioned there, Rob, the Prime Minister has already said that the alleged comments were racist and wrong. What do you think opposition parties want more from him?
Well, the opposition parties, I think, are going to do two things. I mean, I think one is to, to highlight what they will see, and perhaps what others people will see as an error of judgment from the Prime Minister. I mean, if these alleged comments have not been denied, I mean, why would it take you 24 hours? They would say not to see that this was racist. What was holding the Prime Minister back? What does it say about his leadership? About his judgment, but I suspect
what's happening in Gaza,
the
SNP's motion for an immediate ceasefire getting hijacked by Conservatives, Labour,
already on the Labour side,
and the Speaker,
why,
and
would you take more money? Shouldn't you be giving the money back that you've already had from this man?
And turned it into, the MPs are under attack, we need more money for our MPs. And now nobody's mentioning it. I don't even know what George Galloway is saying.
I mean, one thing that you would think would unite MPs is that there's one thing to talk in racist or misogynistic terms, but because this Conservative donor was also allegedly said someone should shoot the MP in question, Diane Abbott, that is really something, given two MPs have already been murdered in the last few years. That surely that's something that every politician could agree is the kind of language that needs to be avoided. But I guess, to set this in some context, Catherine, if you think about it, for the last few weeks, maybe months, there's been a truly sort of rancorous atmosphere at Westminster about issues of race, issues of identity, what counts as extremism, what counts as acceptable protest. And so far, at least, far from this sort of bringing the political parties together as something they could really unite around, it's proved immensely divisive. And I guess that's partly because Britain has a very partisan system. The parties are used to sort of scoring points off each other, even on issues which would seem to be far more trivial and uncontroversial than this. But I mean, whatever the reasons, there is rancor out there. There is political point scoring, and there's not much sign of that abating.
Rob, thank you. We're just going to cross over to the House, where the Prime Minister is standing up and taking questions.
The victims get the justice and redress that they deserve. Today, we're introducing legislation to quash convictions resulting from this scandal. The Department for Business and Trade will be responsible for the new redress scheme, and we're widening access to the optional £75,000 payment. Hundreds of innocent sub-postmasters have fought long and hard for justice. With this bill, we will deliver it. Meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Mr. Speaker, despite serious opposition from the Archbishop of Canterbury, 3 former Home Secretaries and 3 government advisors on anti-Semitism, social cohesion and on political violence, the levelling up secretary is due to widen the definition of extremism tomorrow. Whilst on the benches opposite,
that's it, 1984, you're all. It's 1920. It's 2024.
Taking over Britain. Shouldn't the Prime Minister's priority be getting his own house in order and stepping out extremism, racism, and Islamophobia from within his Conservative Party? And will the Prime Minister finally take Islamophobia seriously and agree to the definition?
Minister.
Yay!
Mr. Speaker, discrimination has no place in our society. And it's important to distinguish between strongly felt political debate on one hand and unacceptable acts of abuse, intimidation and violence on the other. I would urge him to wait for the details of the strategy. It's a sensitive matter, but it's one that we must tackle because there has been a rise in extremists who are trying to hijack our democracy. That must be confronted. And he talks about peddling conspiracy theories. I would just point him in the direction of his previous Labour candidate in Rochdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Rochdale's still on the fucking
personnel who served their country for 15 years are eligible for the Long Service Good Conduct Medal, and similar medals are in place for those who make a career of serving in the police, the fire, the ambulance service and the Coast Guard. But as I learnt on a recent visit to Bournemouth Hospital, where I met the dedicated staff there, no such accolade is in place for the NHS. Would the Prime Minister please support my campaign to see if this anomaly can be corrected so the nation can formally recognise those who devote much of their working lives in the NHS to helping others?
Prime Minister.
Right, this is like Spaceballs, you all. We can pause real time. So, let's see if we can hear a question that doesn't result in somebody getting more money. Then you understand why a lot of these questions are bought and paid for. Example, Neil Hamilton, UKIP member with Count Spunkula and Sargon of Assad and the rest of the fucking cronies. He get caught getting paid to ask questions when he was an MP for some stupid London borough. And if you want to see he's a creepy character, him and his wife, man. Christine, I think. Anywho, so let's see if we can hear any questions that doesn't result in a payoff.
My honourable friend is right that our incredible NHS staff deserve our utmost thanks for their service, and I'm pleased that many NHS organisations, as he knows, have their own schemes in place to do that. We also, of course, recognise NHS staff who are outstanding through our honours system, and MPs are able to acknowledge their work through the NHS Parliamentary Awards, and nominations remain open for that, and I would encourage colleagues to avail themselves of it. But I will make sure that he gets to meet the Secretary of State to discuss his specific proposals further.
We now come to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
On the post office scandal.
Sir Keir's on gear, Sir Keir's on gear. I want to shake his assistant, but he is full of gear. And nobody can hear him breathe, because his nose is fucking fucked. Last night he was partying and getting full of gear.
The Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead will be taking her well-deserved retirement. She has served this House and her constituents with a real sense of duty, and her unwavering commitment to ending modern slavery.
It's like a proper industrial complex. Fucking meeting, everybody just blowing smoke up each other's asshole.
Is the Prime Minister proud to be bankrolled by someone using racist and misogynist language when he says the member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington makes you want to hate all black women?
Mr. Speaker, the alleged comments were wrong, they were racist, and he is now, as I said, the comments were wrong, they were racist. He has rightly apologised for them, and that remorse should be accepted, Mr. Speaker. There is no place for racism in Britain, and the government that I lead is living proof of that.
Yeah, talking in the end.
Mr. Speaker, the man bankrolling the Prime Minister also said that the member for Hackney North...
How the fuck can anybody worldwide take this shit seriously? It's a fucking giraffe. Apart from Angela Rayner later.
Should be shot. How low would he have to sink? What racist, woman-hating threat of violence would he have to make before the Prime Minister plucked up the courage to hand back...
What if he maybe said I wouldn't shag her?
...the £10 million that he's taken from him?
Mr. Speaker, as I said, the gentleman apologised genuinely for his comments, and that remorse should be accepted. But he talks about language. He might want to reflect on the double standards of his deputy leader, calling her opponents scum, Mr. Speaker. His shadow foreign secretary, the shadow foreign secretary, comparing Conservatives to Nazis, Mr. Speaker, and the man that he wanted to make Chancellor, talking about lynching a female minister. His silence on that speaks volumes.
Mr. Speaker, the difference
are they all as
is
bad as each other?
Party, I've changed my party. And Mr. Speaker,
I want to see both the Prime Minister and lead the opposition. Keir Starmer.
2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister invited himself into everyone's living room at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening. No one asked him to give that speech. He chose to do it. He chose to anoint himself as the great healer and pose as some kind of unifier. But when the man bankrolling his election says the member for Hackney North should be shot, he suddenly finds himself tongue-tied, shrinking in sophistry, hoping he can deflect for long enough that we'll all go away. What does the Prime Minister think it was about the hundreds of millions of pounds of NHS contracts given to Frank Hester by his government
just going to ignore Galloway,
attracted him to giving £10 million to the Tory party in the first place?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm absolutely not going to take any lectures from somebody who chose to represent an anti-Semitic terrorist group, Hizb ut-Tahrir, who chose to serve a leader who let anti-Semitism run rife in this Labour Party. Those are his actions, those are his values, and that's how he should be judged.
Anti-Semitic bull crap yet
again. He's describing a Labour Party that no longer exists. I'm describing the man who is bankrolling their upcoming general election.
So an admission that Sir Keir came in and Sir Keir full of the gear came in and just changed the whole Labour Party because Jeremy Corbyn.
He marched them out like fools to defend Islamophobia, and now the member for Ashfield is warming up the opposition benches for them. And yesterday he sent them out to play down racism and misogyny until he was forced to change course. He won't hand the money back. He won't comment on how convenient it is that a man handed huge NHS contracts by his government is now his party's biggest donor. You have to wonder what the point is of a Prime Minister who can't lead and a party that can't govern. And Mr. Speaker, national insurance contributions fund state pensions and the NHS. So is the Prime Minister's latest unfunded £46 billion promise to scrap national insurance going to be paid for by cuts to state pensions or cuts to the NHS?
Prime Minister. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad he's brought up the budget. It's about time that he spoke about his plans, because what have we heard, Mr. Speaker, from the Shadow Chief Secretary? The Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury confirmed.
Sorry. Prime Minister.
The Shadow
really
Chief
is a
Secretary
joke,
to the
though,
Treasury
isn't
has
it?
confirmed
It's
that the Labour
beyond
Party
a
will
joke.
not be sticking to the Conservative government spending plans. So we now have a litany of unfunded promises on the NHS, on mental health, on dentistry, on breakfast clubs, and that doesn't even include...
my brain here. Who gets to ask questions at PMQs?
According to Wikipedia, the leader of the opposition usually asks 6 questions at PMQs, either as a whole block or in 2 separate groups of 3. If the first question is asked by a government backbencher, the leader of the opposition is the second MP to ask questions.
Right, so that's... the opposition gets 6. See, I don't think the AI's taking over the planet anytime soon. Wednesday at noon, when the House of Commons sitting, during which the Prime Minister answers questions from members of Parliament. The Institute for Government has described PMQs as the most distinctive and internationally famous feature of British politics. Right. Practice. Backbench MPs wishing to ask a question must enter their names on the order paper. The names of entrants are then shuffled. Shuffled. With a blind man, honest sir. Shuffled in a ballot to produce a random order in which they will be called by the Speaker. Aye, right. The Speaker will then call on the MPs to put their question, usually in an alternative fashion. One MP for the government benches is followed by one from the opposition benches. MPs who are not selected may be chosen to ask a supplementary question if they catch the eye of the Speaker, which is done by standing and sitting immediately before the Prime Minister gives an answer. What a fucking antiquated way of doing fucking things, man. The leader of the opposition usually asks 6 questions, either as a whole block, 2 separate groups. If the first question is asked, what do you... Right, so there we go. It's a secret ballot. Your name's out of a hat. But, like, if you notice... So, like, maybe they say the ballot happens and then the Prime Minister gets told what questions are going to get asked, and then he can prepare for them properly, because he is prepared for every single one of these questions. There's God knows how many people in there, 600 odd? 600 MPs? In fact, I'm acting like I've not got a brain. How many MPs in the UK Parliament?
According to Wikipedia, Parliament is an elected body consisting of 650 members known as members of Parliament.
No far off. No far off, 650. So if they were asking random questions and the MP and the PM wasn't prepared, he would just be fucking stabbing in the dark with half his answers. So I dare say that, I don't know, let's take them at the word and it is random. But the PM gets them beforehand and gets time to prepare.
The £28 billion 2030 eco-pledge that he's still committed to. But what we all know, Mr. Speaker, is that while we're cutting taxes, Labour's unfunded promises mean higher taxes for working Britain.
Man, this is the same old shite for fucking decades now.
Unfunded £46 billion promise. And he thinks he can trick people into believing that, but simply shaking the Tory magic money tree will bring it into existence. No, let's be clear. 80% of national insurance is spent on social security and pensions. 20% is spent on the NHS.
Imagine her as fucking Prime Minister. That would be the business, man.
Or the NHS, or he will have to
I
raise
hope
other
fucking
taxes or
Sir on the gear.
Which is it, Prime Minister?
He meets has an accident when he gets put in.
But if you actually listened to the Chancellor last week, what he would have seen is NHS spending is going up, Mr. Speaker. It's going up. It's a plan that's backed by the NHS CEO, who says that we're giving her what she needs, and at the same time, we are responsibly cutting taxes for millions of people in work. An average worker benefiting from a £900 tax cut, Mr. Speaker. But what I'm hearing for him is he's against our plans to cut national insurance.
What I'm hearing constantly every time I subject myself to this pish is my daddy stinks worse than your daddy, aye, but your granddaddy's stunk worse than your daddy's. Oh, it's pathetic non-starter argument. It's a real good example of your Russell Brand pseudo-intellectual type that swallows a thesaurus and goes out there and bamboozles people with bullshit. And nobody actually says anything. Well, we inherited a shite system, and then the other one will stand up and go, yeah, but you inherited the shite system, and so did we inherit your shite system, and that's their argument constantly, the to and fro. Alright, Roberto Rhymes, how you doing, my man? Is the boy so zippy? I think he's got a cocaine habit, Roberto. That's why I was saying like that. Well, aye, Zippy must have a P on the gear. He's a fucking gimp, Zippy, isn't he?
It's this government that's
we all know gimps like a good bit of fucking cocaine before getting gimped up.
Working people. It's this government that's cutting taxes for every single person.
See, this government good, your government's bad. We cut taxes and you bravely taxes and that's all we have over and over and over. It gets really tiring. God should have his own wee fucking slot, man. Make this shit interesting.
It's all here. Making Britain a clean energy superpower. He's still stuck to it, Mr. Speaker. And if you look through it carefully, there's billions in spending he's already committed to Scotland, billions for Wales. There's actually money for North London too, I notice. But the problem is, none of it is funded. So why doesn't he come clean and tell him under his plans, Britain people's taxes are going up, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, millions of people around the UK and Europe have been inspired by the brilliance of Six Nations rugby. And Premier League clubs like Gloucester Rugby, which were funded during the pandemic through loans authorised by the Prime Minister and then-Chancellor, have always been grateful for being kept solvent. But the Prime Minister will also know that the finances of some of these clubs are fragile and that the current loan repayment schemes could be crippling. So will my right honourable friend ask the Sports Minister and the Treasury to try and find a solution through this?
Can we just call it free money?
Interests are protected and all of us can go on being inspired by top-class rugby for years to come.
Fuck rugby in the asshole.
Mr. Speaker, Fucking absolutely right that we stepped in with a £150 million financial lifeline.
Listen to those figures.
Survival of Premiership rugby league clubs during the pandemic, and I am told that DCMS is working with Sport England as the agent to talk to borrowers.
It's all about the money. It's all about the money. They just make it up fucking.
But I can also proudly tell him that we are talking to the Rugby Football Union and the Premiership League to secure not just the future of rugby union, but also his local Gloucester Rugby.
That song's getting up. Scrap that song.
The SNP, Stephen Flynn.
So, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wish to begin by wishing Ramadan Mubarak to Muslims across these aisles. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party have accepted a £10 million donation from an individual who has said that one of our parliamentary colleagues in this chamber should be shot. Why is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom putting money before morals?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I said, the comments were wrong. The gentleman in question has apologised for them, and that remorse should be accepted.
Stephen Flynn. This is complete rubbish. The gentleman in question apologised for being rude. He wasn't rude, he was racist, he was odious, and he was downright bloody dangerous. Now, on Monday, the number 10 said, we've seen an unacceptable rise in extremist activity which is seeking to divide our society and hijack our democratic institutions. Isn't extremism that we should all be worried about? The views of those Tory donors that we've read about this week.
Prime Minister. No, Mr. Speaker, there has actually been a rise in extremist activity that is seeking to hijack our democratic institutions. It's important.
Listen to the laughter.
It is important that we have the tools to tackle this threat.
Listen to the laughter because a lot of them understand what the fuck happened there, man.
And I would urge him to wait for the Community Secretary to release the details.
Will Quins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sub-postmasters across the country will welcome the government's announcement today on the introduction of legislation to overturn the convictions of those who were wrongly convicted. But can my right honourable friend reassure this House that that legislation will be passed as quickly as possible, and we will support all sub-postmasters right across our United Kingdom?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I want to pay tribute to all postmasters who have campaigned tirelessly for justice, including those who tragically won't see the justice that they deserve. Today's legislation marks an important step in finally clearing their names.
I think George Galloway's question will get
to them to progress this legislation as soon as possible before summer recess.
Roberto, I gave you a shout on the Skypes on Saturday, mate. See if you fancied
in Scotland and Northern
joining
Ireland
for
as they
a
develop
chat.
their plans.
But he'll do it again. He'll do the same again this Saturday,
How
mate.
convictions are quashed, redress will be paid to victims across the whole of our United Kingdom on exactly the same basis.
Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The future of children's cancer services.
Ed Davey.
One thing at a time, mate. One thing at a time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The future of children's cancer
I sing it myself.
services
Little
in
by
my
little.
constituency, across South West London, across Surrey, Sussex and beyond, will be decided by NHS England tomorrow. The existing service is world-leading and has saved the lives of countless children. Many of us who've engaged with the consultation process feel that a wrong decision is about to be made, ignoring risk to children's cancer care by moving them to the Evelina. If the Evelina is chosen tomorrow, will the Prime Minister personally intervene and delay any final decision until he's met with myself and concerned MPs across the House so he can prevent these risks to our children's cancer services?
Minister.
I missed the full question.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman knows, decisions about clinical
Was there
provision
money
are
involved?
widely made by clinicians in local areas across the country. More generally, we're investing in more oncologists, radiologists and community diagnostic centres, which are contributing to cancer treatment being at record levels, but I will of course ensure that he and colleagues
record levels, and then they start giving you numbers, and then they start saying but in real terms, and you're like what is there? What else is there other than real terms? Oh, she's alright. Make her PM.
But reports that the government wishes to broaden the definition of extremism are concerning, because in separating the definition of extremism from actual violence and harm, we may criminalise people with a wide range of legitimate views and have a chilling effect on free speech. So can my
cunt's got an impressive beard.
that instead of trying to police people's thought and speech, as
Got
those
him
opposite
that
clearly
impressive
wish to
beard dude.
the government
Like
will
dude, they've
instead
got him
target
101 to
specific
be the
groups
next
that foster
PM.
terrorism and those who fund them.
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend makes a good point, and that's why
Better
the
place, my
strategy
man, and
that
you'll see
I
her
would
when you
urge
see her.
to wait for will, I think, be one that she can support, because it is our duty to make sure the government has the tools to tackle the threat that she rightly identifies and highlights, and this is
I've seen
absolutely
her
not
before, man. I need to
about
move her up
silencing
a
those
couple of
with
benches.
private and peaceful voices, nor will it impact free speech, which we on this side of the House will always strive
Can
to
have her
protect.
politics off in her and Raina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Children deserve the right to breathe clean air. However, many schools are in areas with high levels of air pollution.
The real housewife
Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of
of
London,
the Houses
has
of Commons. And the House of Commons.
Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London,
Oh, Matt,
has
watch that.
announced a pilot for 200 of London's most impacted schools to access
Think about
air
it, man. You
quality
could put
filters
fucking mate Angela
so
Rayner, the
children
hunters
can
are cool
breathe
shit.
clean air in their
Those are cool
classrooms.
uniforms.
Does the Prime Minister support this pilot, and will he implement
Pilot.
similar measures across
Money.
our country?
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that latest published figures show that air pollution has reduced significantly since 2010, and partly due to our targets, partly due to our legally binding targets to reduce concentrations. They will continue to reduce over the following years, and on top of that, we've also provided almost £1 billion to help local authorities across the country implement
his beard
local
is impressive,
plans to
man.
reduce NO2 and make sure that we can support those impacted by those plans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand the latest scheme that's been considered is to pay migrants thousands of pounds to leave Britain. Prime Minister, let's just leave the ECHR and deport them for free.
He's a better Brad, isn't she?
So far, over 40,000 Brits have signed my petition with the Conservative Post calling for us to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. Will the Prime Minister commit to leaving the ECHR, or at the very least, have it in our manifesto to have a referendum and let Britain decide?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right that we must do everything we can to secure our borders, ensure that those who come here illegally do not have the ability to stay. That's why our Rwanda scheme and legislation is so important. And what I've said repeatedly, and will happily say to her again, is that I will not let a foreign court block our ability to send people to Rwanda when the time comes.
Liv Sewell Roberts.
The National Theatre production, Nye, which stars Michael Sheen, celebrates at the end.
Oh, check her. Fuck, I like her style, man. Purple hair and fucking.
Of the NHS. But UCL findings indicate that austerity policies between 2010 and 2019 are responsible for a 3-year setback in life expectancy progress. Does he, or the Leader of the Opposition for that matter, think public services can withstand an extra £20 billion of cuts?
Woman.
Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'm pleased that the National Theatre received significant funding from the Chancellor in the recent budget to support their fantastic work across the UK. But I am surprised to hear her raising the NHS when it's her party that's propping up the Welsh Labour government in Wales, which has absolutely the worst NHS performance of any part of the United Kingdom.
There we go. Turn the question into electioneering.
Mr. Speaker, may I thank my right honourable friend for meeting me 6 weeks ago to discuss the plight of victims of COVID-19 vaccine damage. And may I ask him, following that discussion and his very sympathetic response during the GB People's Forum to Mr. John Watt, who himself is a victim of COVID-19 vaccine damage, whether the government will be supporting my COVID-19 vaccine payments bill this Friday?
Mr. Speaker, can I thank my honourable friend for raising the issue and the conversation that I had with him previously, and extend my sympathies to all of those who have been affected by this. I will, of course, make sure that he can meet with the Secretary of State to discuss his bill, and as I committed to him, we are looking at the issue in some detail to make sure that the policies we've got are providing the support that they need to.
These questions definitely seem random to me.
The Prime Minister stood outside Downing Street saying that he wanted to root out hate and extremism.
Can you imagine?
Yet it shamefully took him more than 24 hours to finally say the remarks by the Tories' biggest donor that looking at the Right Honourable Member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington makes you want to hate all
God bless her heart, man. Yes, they sit there like a school kid with a bit of paper.
In November, the Prime Minister accepted a non-cash donation to the tune of £15,000 from Lancaster for the use of his helicopter. So will he reimburse?
Danny, I don't know if you heard me earlier on, mate. Apparently everybody puts their, if they've got questions, they put their questions in the tumbler, you know, like they do for the bingo. It's like a bingo collar. And then they pick out as many as they can. Aren't they? I believe them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Later today, I look forward to voting for a tax cut for thousands
of this is them rounding up the house niggles before the election.
£900 off the tax bill for thousands of my constituents. After listening to the rhetoric from the Leader of the Opposition today, does the Prime Minister expect that the main opposition party will vote against this afternoon's tax cuts?
The mother of all parliaments. What an excellent question.
We believe in a country where hard work is rewarded and people can keep more of their hard-earned money, which is why we're cutting their taxes by an average of £900 each. We hear consistently from the party opposite, not only do they disagree with that approach, they continue to cling to unfunded spending promises that would put taxes up, but also the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, we learnt just...
Right, we don't stink, they do. That's pretty much what he's saying, and hitting it with hammers or bamboozling you with numbers. On a side note, TikTok caught me with a community guideline strike which I've appealed. Let's see if it works. For the clip I put up saying Michelle Obama still might replace Biden.
Have taken to referring to the European Court of Human Rights as a foreign court, as if there's something inherently wrong with things being foreign or people being
foreign. Baldy Scottish cunts in Parliament. Is that like a uniform for the SNP?
Which has an Irish president and a UK justice with an LLB from Dundee be considered
his face
foreign.
is too round to go
the
for
House
that
needs
look,
to hear
man.
the
He
Prime Minister
makes him look like
today
a
to the
fucking
UK's
heat
continued
ball.
membership of a court and a convention which protected our rights and
Looks
freedoms
like a Casper
for over
the
70
Ghost
years.
fucking fat cunt. Looks like Casper the Ghost's
When it
frat
comes to
brother.
the issue of tackling illegal migration, when Parliament expresses a clear view on what it believes should happen, supports that
He
with
looks like
legislation,
Romulan
and
in a
we believe
wig.
we are acting in accordance with all our international obligations, I've been very clear that I will not let a foreign court stop us from sending illegal migrants to Rwanda. That is the right policy and in fact the only way to ensure security of our borders and end the unfairness of illegal migration.
Sir Edward Lee.
As a general election is not just a mere expression of opinion, but a serious choice, will my right honourable friend agree that there is only one potential party of government that has the will, the inclination and the determination to stop mass illegal and legal migration, and that is the Conservative Party. Let's unite our movement and do it!
I agree.
So if I get elected to be a dictator, I'm like,
I agree with my honourable friend entirely.
start howling and beating my chest.
Not only has the
Doing the Tarzan thing.
He would still
Mix it up a bit.
Which tells you everything you need
Keep
to know.
things fresh.
On this issue, their values are simply not those of the British people. There's only one party that's going to stop the boats. It's the Conservative Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Under this Conservative government's watch, Thames Water have dumped over 72 billion litres of sewage into London's rivers, all whilst racking up multi-billion-pound debts. And reports are now that they could go bust any day. Despite this, the government is still refusing to publish their contingency plans for the collapse
My name's
of our
Andrew
country's
Curry.
biggest water
I just
zone.
tripped up
So,
and my
yes
dick
or no,
ended up in it.
does the Prime
Honestly,
Minister
Your
believe
Honour.
that Thames Water will still exist by the end of the year?
Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, Mr. Speaker, it wouldn't be right for me to comment on individual companies, but what I can say is that our ambitious storm overflow reduction plan is backed by £60 billion
Are you like Jeffrey like
investment.
my...
We now monitor every single
Imagine some
storm
cunt done that,
overflow
you would
across
get
England
all the
and have
publicity in the world.
legislated to introduce unlimited penalties on water companies that breach their obligations.
a bow tie that twirls, and you've got the you've got the button in your pocket, and every time fucking they say something you like or don't like, you go.
Will come in, and yet key changes that are required
Oh, man.
have still not been decided by the EU. There are urgent decisions that are needed on additional funding and preparation to keep Dover clear and Kent moving through with its traffic. Can my
Roberto, you know you're getting old, mate, when you have to shave your earlobes. You know, you're fucking, you go to the hairdressers, the guy's shaving your lobs. What are you doing? Alright, you're talking about all the fucking hairs that have grown out my ears like that, then.
Prime Minister. No, one of my friends is right to raise this issue, and I can assure her that it is being discussed at the highest levels of government between UK ministers and EU and French counterparts to make sure that we have practical and constructive solutions that will ease the flow of traffic in the way that she describes and will benefit her local communities.
Rachel
Woo!
Thank you, Mr.
Definitely
Speaker.
get a calendar,
158
calendar,
days,
funnily
and there's
enough.
no peace and no justice. There is no
MPs.
food, there is no clean water, there is no sanitation, and no medical aid.
She's it.
There is just no words left, as disease
Yep.
is spreading and the death toll is rising, not least
I say no.
amongst children, victims of these atrocities. It is evident that the Prime Minister's plan is not working. So will he change track for the sake of these
In
children
fact, she can't
and so
roll
many
her
more,
R's as well.
and work to secure a
Go sit in
bilateral,
England, man.
immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've said repeatedly that we are incredibly concerned about the growing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. too many civilians have lost their lives and nowhere near enough aid is getting through. And in contrast to what the Honourable said, actually the UK is playing a leading role in alleviating that suffering. Just recently increasing the amount of aid this year to £100 million. Just today, 150 tonnes of UK aid is due to arrive in Gaza, and a full field hospital flown from Manchester to the Middle East last week will also
what a
arrive
racket.
in Gaza.
You supply the love bombs and bullets, put the holes in them, and supply the fucking blankets and fucking cotton wool and plasters to put over the holes. It's a good racket, isn't it? Will
my right honourable friend join me in thanking the maternity team at the Royal Cornwall Hospital at Trelisk in my Truro and Falmouth constituency for all their outstanding work they've done to improve maternity services over the last few years. Their sheer hard work, along with the coming new Women and Children's Hospital, mean that there are now no midwifery vacancies in Cornwall, which I think you'll agree is a fantastic achievement.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for highlighting the improvements in maternity services?
Boys and girls, stick a wee thumbs up if you appreciate this. I'm going to try and do it every week. I don't know.
For reducing baby
it gets a bit samey.
For her
It's good for the crack and all that.
Baby loss certificates, and as she knows, we are
I don't
committed
know
to a
about
new
you,
Women
man. I
and
just
Children's
find
hospital for my honourable friends local
questions are relevant
as part of the new hospital programme.
Sir,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in
facade
Somerset and working
that they
together
put
with
on, and it isn't even like a secret facade. It's like if you scratch beneath the surface.
For the reopening of a train station
Parliament,
in the Somerton and Newport area.
it's no secret that like how all these things are organised and set up, and then you're like, and this is democracy scam. You know, and then there's people out there that still think, aye, let's set up our own party and vote ourselves in. You're like, aye, just get ate up and chewed out with those massive institutions. They have unbelievable resources to throw at fucking
Conservatives in the southwest
small fish in their big
the
pond.
reopen of local stations, and actually recently Cullompton and Wellington will be one of the places that receives funding as a result of our decision on HS2. But it's because of that decision that we now have freed up billions of pounds of funding to invest in local transport across the country, and it will be local leaders that will be put in charge of that money.
Right, I did stick my dick in the stink, but I'm cleaning it up.
Prime Minister, in the 1930s, one of your less illustrious predecessors, Neville Chamberlain, so denuded the British Armed Forces of funding until it was too late that we failed to deter Adolf Hitler, and 50 million people tragically died in the Second World War. Russia has invaded Ukraine. China is threatening Taiwan. British shipping is being attacked by Houthis in the Red Sea.
Yes!
As the son of a D-Day veteran,
it's a bonanza, baby.
And the House of Commons,
love bombs, love bullets, fucking plasters,
and make the same mistake
fucking fake blood,
well, can I thank
needles and threads, fake legs and shit. It's a bonanza, man. It's going to be great for the economy, man.
That they play, and I agree with him wholeheartedly that sadly the world that we are living in is becoming both more challenging strategically and more dangerous, and in response to those challenges we must invest more in our armed forces. That is exactly what we are doing.
Cha-ching, baby!
Since the Cold War, and
it's almost like the people that sell the love bombs and bullets have a vested interests of wars happening, continue to happen, starting wars, continuing wars, etc., etc., etc. It's a bonanza. Then the same people that are selling the love bombs and bullets are the same motherfuckers that are fucking selling you the fucking plasters.
We'll do whatever it takes to keep our country safe.
Plasters and magic sponges. Remember, used to get that at football when you were young, man. Magic sponges.
So that's the conclusion of this week's Prime Minister's questions. And we can go back live to Westminster and our political correspondent, Rob Watson. And Rob, as
he'll tell you what you think.
PMQs was dominated with questions about how the Prime Minister has responded to the alleged comments made by the Tory donor.
Well, a load of bullshit. I mean, think of all the things that are happening in the world. I don't think I had one question about Gaza.
What did you make of the exchanges today?
Not one question about Gaza. What's happening in Gaza?
Catherine wouldn't need me
Not
to
one.
tell them that, you know, it was
Fuck
just
all about Ukraine either, if
rancorous,
my memory serves, but I was too busy checking out with Scott.
Incredibly partisan, incredibly bad-tempered, so nobody needs me to tell them that, really. They could have watched it for themselves. A really nasty atmosphere in the House of Commons. But I guess that the news lines are that Rishi Sunak, when asked repeatedly whether the Conservatives would give back the money, said no, they wouldn't be. So he seems to have drawn a red line there, and to have made the point repeatedly that Mr Hester's apologies should be accepted and the world move on, as it were. So those, if you like, are the news lines. Now, whether that will hold, or whether perhaps like yesterday, where Downing Street had originally described Mr Hester's comments as unacceptable but then moved to racism, you know, whether this red line will hold, I guess in the inevitable words of journalism, we'll wait and see.
And as our political editor Chris Mason has been reporting on the BBC Live page, Dan Abbott in the House had been standing up to signal her intention to ask a question. She wasn't called by the Speaker to ask a question. Just
news reporter that's got fucking half African and half English accent, and at different points. She can't even make her mind up what to use.
Others on the precise protocol of Parliament, despite reporting on it for many years. But essentially, the way it tends to work for those who are surprised by this is that you do get a list, you know, in advance, way in advance, a list of those MPs who are going to be called, and normally the Speaker will stick to that list. Now, whether Diane Abbott had made a request to the Speaker to ask a question to the Prime Minister, at this point we don't know, or I should say, Catherine, I don't know, but it normally is the convention that you have this list. We normally know the list of those who are going to be asking questions 1 or 2 days before.
See, I'm dictator, man. Everything's going to be written fucking down, and it's not going to be the cunts that have to obey the shit, and it's fucking making up the shit.
Extremism.
You get that shit?
And there were some questions about the government's plan to set out a new official definition of extremism. Just talk to us about this and why some people are challenging those plans.
Well, we don't know exactly what the government's plans are going to be, but we're going to get them tomorrow, so we haven't got long to wait. But essentially, we're expecting Mr Sunak and the government to provide an official government definition.
Remember, these things that get put in are the things that are on the books for any future government that gets in. So you might be sitting around the room going, look at all the Muppets, they would never do X, Y or Z. But you're opening this up to abuse, in my humble opinion, man.
And what we've heard, not just in the last few minutes,
and who's to say somewhere down the line we don't end up with a fucking badge or Bobo Johnson in?
Senior figures in the
Because
Church
that
of
is
England,
very possible.
Senior figures, but some concern that perhaps a definition of extremism might be drawn perhaps too widely, the criticism goes, and might kind of encompass people who have a profound disagreement with elements of British government policy in some areas, but maybe couldn't be described as extremists.
You can call people that disagree with the government
really
extremists.
About this, Catherine,
which possibly
is that this
could
is
go
going
wrong
to
with
be,
that shit.
whatever the government announces tomorrow, it's going to be landing at a time where there's a pretty sort of febrile atmosphere in British politics, and that so far, you know, rather than threats of violence to MPs,
nice
rather than what we've been seeing in the Middle East, being able to bring parties together in this country, it just hasn't worked out that way. So this policy, whatever it turns out to be, is going to be landing in a, you know, as I say, in a pretty sort of febrile political atmosphere, and febrile beyond, of course, Westminster. It's something that's really touching people's nerves in this country.
Thank you very much, Rob, for that analysis on this week's Prime Minister's Questions. That's the BBC's political correspondent, Rob Watson there. The other story that we have been following today is the UK COVID inquiry happening in Cardiff today, and the Welsh First Minister Mark...
Well, that will be that. You can go and finish it on your own time. So, thanks everybody that has joined. I'm going to fire off to the gym before it gets too fucking busy, and then it's a pain in the arse, and you've not got the place to yourself. Anyway, So stick a wee thumbs up if you enjoy this every Wednesday. I'll probably be putting it on. Depends. There, it's fruitless. But I've now, every day's a school day. I now know the bullcrap mechanism as to how and who asks those questions. They basically make it up. Well, it's a ballot. People put forward questions and they have a secret ballot. And then the Prime Minister, as they said as well, gets fucking told what's going to get said. And he can prepare for that shit. Lovely, lovely jubbly. Right, let's see what's happening in the world. Breaking news.
Keir Starmer mentioning Theresa May and paying tributes to her at the beginning of the Prime Minister's questions. Is he a man who looks like he's Prime Minister already?
Well, I think more people get to see of Keir Starmer, the better, really. I think we need a lot more scrutiny over Keir Starmer and what he'll do when he's Prime Minister. He does have this enormous black hole. He seems to be, in his finances, and he seems to be sleepwalking. The less he says, the more he flip-flops, he thinks he can become Prime Minister. But there's going to be that shining light on his plans for, as far as I can see it, open borders, for plans to realignment with the European Union, certainly his tax and spend plans, because that's what he is after all, an old tax and spend Labour Party potential Prime Minister.
Hold on, I'm not going to accept you're shaking your head, it's your turn now.
From the government that has increased taxes to the highest level since the Second World War, even with last week's budget, taxes are higher.
I don't know if anybody has ever done this, is in the habit of doing this, but see when you channel hop, like you'll spend like one morning just channel hopping, looking for like the headlines and what's happening and stuff, and it doesn't matter where you go, it's all the same shit pretty much on fucking repeat. For the BBCs, to the Sky Newsies, right, that's pretty much all we've got here in the UK. All our terrestrial TV and all that, it's BBC, Sky News and ITN, International Television, and that's all we've got. You've got like other news turning up in other channels, but if you watch carefully you'll see that they're pretty much all those three main news organisations. You've also got the Rupert Murdoch stuff, which is no longer Sky News, but he's got Talk TV and Talk Sport, which is on the council TVs.
Taxpayers' money.
You know that
is made. That's made at a treasury.
All the same.
Appalling is the fact that even though the NHS has said what they said yesterday.
Oh God, no comment.
And I want things to change. The country is crying out for it. Whatever the outcome, I think the country needs a reset. We need a new start. My view is that needs to be with a Labour government, but that's up to the voting public.
Now, if Labour win power, Catherine, Donald Trump could be the president of the US for another 4 years. Scott from Nottingham, we know where he is now, thank you for that, Scott. He wants to know, what would Labour do if Trump wins the election? Because lots of your members, MPs, your colleagues have been critical of Donald Trump a lot over the last few years.
Well, just as who our government is the choice of those that vote for us or not. That's very much a choice for the public of the United States of America, and obviously we need to respect whatever decision the voting public make and work with whoever is the leader of that great nation, of whom we are great allies, and we will continue to be so.
Would it damage the so-called special relationship of Keir Starmer's Labour leader against Donald Trump?
I think the special relationship has been around a lot longer than any one president, and you know, a British Foreign Secretary and Prime Minister, whether they are Labour or Conservative, and I presume I speak for Robbie, will work with whoever is the United States President.
OK. Shelley from Kent says, we never get anywhere with PMQs. Why can't they discuss policies that matter? But I just want to broaden that issue a little bit, because Theresa May, both leaders being incredibly gracious and paying tribute to the public service of a Conservative Prime Minister. Should the House of Commons just be a bit more nice?
Well, I think, well, certainly
Prime Minister's questions is an opportunity for backbench colleagues to be able to raise constituency issues. And I know when I was as a backbencher, I raised very important constituency-based issues like wanting to see an inquiry into child sexual exploitation, gang-related grooming across the Bradford district.
Okay, I want to know.
Of which every opportunity Labour do not want to see rolled out, and that gives me the opportunity to raise that to the Prime Minister of the day, and we do see that being rolled out at Prime Minister's questions.
Nicer PMQs?
I think it's important that we have robust holding to account of government ministers. I think, we have questions every day. We have Prime Minister's questions. I think it's a really important moment. And I appreciate sometimes it can be frustrating because I actually think the questions are often better than the answers. But I do think it's important to have that moment where again, backbenchers do get the chance as well to directly ask the Prime Minister things.
I made a note here of what was said. The PM used the words scum, Nazi and lynching at Labour. And of course the response from Sir Keir Starmer was talking about the remarks from Frank Hester, racism and the rest. It's quite grim, isn't it?
Well, and I think you raise an important point about public discourse in general, and that I think, Parliament and all those in public life have a responsibility to be responsible, because we know that in our language and in how we conduct ourselves, and I do think Parliament should elevate itself, be respectful, have robust debate, but in a respectful and responsible way. And I think sometimes we are falling short of that, and it is a concern.
And in the spirit of that, would you like, as the Labour spokesperson, to say something nice about Theresa May?
Oh, gosh. So Theresa May, she's done incredible work, particularly since she stood down as Prime Minister. I think that in her post-Prime Ministerial period, I think, is where she has really gained respect for the work that she's done on modern slavery, which I think we can all support.
Okay.
Robbie. Theresa May is the ultimate public servant. She at every level, whether it was before she entered the Parliament or now as an MP or Prime Minister, public duty has always been the ultimate.
But nearly lost us Brexit. And moving on, though, from that, thanks to Environment Minister Robbie Moore and Shadow Education Minister Catherine McKinnell for a terrific chat here on PMQs Live.
Coming up, it is Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily. Tom and Emily. Hello. We were all together last week.
Of course, his donors...
Gloria was saying she missed us from last week. We got a huge amount. We were all together. She didn't miss us. Anyway, take it away.
Well, of course, we're ignoring what the Prime
the only
Minister
one that
has
thinks
been
she
saying
doesn't
in
have
response
eyebrows.
to that scandal over the donations. But has Keir Starmer stuck his
These are
foot
that
in
kind
it
of
too with regard to an attack on
but
national
I think it's the
insurance
colour of
cuts?
hair.
And what exactly can £3,000 get
Who'd be
you
borderline
in
albinos?
Rwanda? We'll find out from someone who is there in Kigali and knows exactly what the cost of living there is. That's because the government is going to give £3,000 to failed asylum seekers to voluntarily move to
politics. Got to love a woman whose lipstick matches their dress. So, every Wednesday when PMQs is on, I'll do this live for as long as I can last it. It's meaningless, innit? I kept thinking I was naive as to the mechanisms how he got questions up, and I thought, like, fuck's sake, with the splash that George has made and the way every cunt's arseholes are puckering, I thought that they must address this in some way, shape or form, and they have addressed it with just blanking them in the whole subject altogether. Somebody mentioned Rochdale there, but that was about it. Keir's on the gear, Sir Keir's on the gear, he can't breathe through his nose 'cause he's full of gear. There's many come to see him, they stand and gaze at all, they remember Sir Keir is on the fucking gear. See, like modern day politics, that should be fucking the Conservatives. They should run ads doing that. Can you imagine everybody outside the polling station just singing "Sir Keir's on the gear, Sir Keir's on the gear," and then you would see him like secretly having wee fucking Vicks, fucking nasal fucking things. And pure fucking sniffing them out his box, man, having steam rooms and all that before going out like that. I can't breathe through my nose. And then one of my first questions to him when I'm having a one-on-one debate, I'm like, okay, you can't breathe through your nose. Blow up this balloon using your nose. If you can't do that, I call you a liar, sir. It'd be brilliant, man. Oh. Vic Maeve's whole fucking thing, those wee... I think they're banned because they fucking simulate taking cocaine so fucking badly. You get the habit for it. So take it easy, Roberto, Jeffrey. Hopefully see you next week. And Saturday with the big cross, man. Round about 4 bells, I reckon. Rangers won't be playing till Sunday because they're playing on Thursday. Tomorrow even. Get it, got it, good. Cat cheese, no cats or cheese were harmed in the filming. Clips! And remember, citizens, always subscribe. Hit the notification bell as well. And $19.95 plus shipping and handling will keep you out of hell.